Well, it started on ourselves somehow.
So it's live
I used in-stream.
now. Okay.
Testing.
I don't hear anything.
Yeah, okay.
We're not hearing anything. Maybe a little too loud. Yeah, that's good.
body at ease, breathing quiet, sentiment, and Neverland. Dharma friends, sitting still in vital silence, wanting nothing, we practice eco-Buddhism together. The sound of the temple bell booms for all to see from conflict. May the way of Buddha usher in the dawn of non-violent global village forever. Here is the after sound of the bell. Thunder of silence, light after Dharma rain. Amoga Varochana Mahamudra Mani Padme Jvala Pravartaya.
Please stand and join me in chanting of the three refuges. So we take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, first in Sino-Korean out of respect to our tradition, and then in English. So for those who are new, please place your hands palm to palm as we do this chanting. I go for refuge to the Buddha
I go for refuge to the Buddha
and resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment
and realize the great way.
and realize the great way.
I go for refuge to the Dharma
I go for refuge to the Dharma
and resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will penetrate the teachings
I will penetrate the teachings
and uncover oceans of wisdom.
and uncover oceans of wisdom.
I go for refuge to the Sangha
I go for refuge to the Sangha
and resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will seek peace and happiness for the many
I will seek peace and happiness for the many
and transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
and transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
Please return now for a shorter period of meditation. Please join me in some mindful stretching as an end to our meditation. Good morning, dear Sangha. Can you hear okay? I see on the chat there are several comments about sound. So I ask one of our technical people to please attend to those comments. Okay, so we're good to go. Thank you. So now please place your hands palm to palm and listen deeply as we read from today's Dhammapada chapter, the True Master. In them, there is no yesterday, no tomorrow, no today. Possessing nothing, wanting nothing. They are full of power, fearless, wise, exalted. They have vanquished all things. They see by virtue of their purity. So in the Dhammapada reading, that sounds like someone of very advanced practice who has achieved or who has reached a state of some deep awakening. And that will be our topic today, is this awakening or enlightenment. At the end of the year, the end of December, we always have several more intense meditation practice opportunities. So it is the time of the winter solstice, and typically in monasteries around the world, this is a time for deepened practice. In our particular tradition, we had a 5-day retreat between Christmas and New Year's. And then we had a service on New Year's Eve. And during that New Year's Eve service, we took some time to reflect on our unskillfulness, our defilements, and then we burned them, making way for a new beginning. And then New Year's Day, in that special service, we made resolutions for the coming year. This past Friday and Saturday, so just a couple of days ago, we had an all-night sitting to celebrate the Buddha's Enlightenment. So it began at 8 p.m. and ended at 4 p.m. And people from the Sangha came and sat with us on shifts, some in person and some online. So appreciate so much the presence of everyone during that practice. I wanted to read a little from a little from the Enlightenment City. It's mostly a silent practice, but at midnight we read the story of the Buddha's enlightenment experience. So I thought I would share that with you today. For some of you, this will be new. For others, it's like an old friend. So please take it in that spirit. This is by Rafe Martin, who is a Buddhist scholar and storyteller. And he has taken many of the stories of the Buddha's life and made them into versions that we can relate to more easily. So this is about the Buddha's enlightenment experience. The future Buddha, spreading all the sweet grass on the earth at the base of the tree, seated himself in the lotus posture. His resolve was deeply rooted, like a mountain. He announced, "Though only my skin, sinews, and bones remain, and my blood and flesh dry up and wither away, never from this seat will I stir until I have attained full enlightenment." And he pressed forward once again in his deep meditation. Many fearsome and foul, as well as many seductive and pleasant visions, arose before him. All the forces of life's clinging to states of joy, comfort, and ease came swaying gratefully to him in the form of 3 women, the 3 beautiful daughters of Mara, the tempter. They danced seductively before him, opening wide their arms to him and revealing the perfection of their bodies. They sang tenderly, calling him great hero and conqueror. They offered him exquisite pleasure, unceasing comfort, endless rest, while all of life's terrors, fears of death and suffering, fears of hell's horrors, pain, ugliness, the unknown, also mobbed him, shrieking of torment and deformity, of all manner of terrible and disgusting experiences should he persist. Mara's army descended upon him, horse-headed, ten-eyed, tiger-faced, many arms, with faces in their chests, with sharp yellow teeth, with blood-dripping mouths, with spiders for hands, hissing with adders' tongues. On they came, heaving stones, knives, spears, hurling flaming discs, mud, filth. Screaming madly, they whirled down upon him like a flock of hunger-maddened crows, wildly striving to peck and tear some slight scraps of nourishment from a large smooth stone. But they could not. The future Buddha sat on, viewing all these wild, delusive displays evenly, surely, calmly, completely unmoved. It was as if he were watching the harmless antics of children at play. In an instant, the hurled knives and spears turned into flowers. The mud and filth became incense and perfume. The beautiful women grew old. The armies became silent. Then Mara the tempter himself approached the future Buddha, and assuming the voice of Gautama's own innerness, the habit voice of his own thoughts, began to question the future Buddha with these words. Are you sure you are the one? Sure you have this Buddha nature? Sure you are worthy of coming to supreme enlightenment today, right now? Think of it, supreme enlightenment. Supreme enlightenment. But the future Buddha only touched the earth lightly with his right hand and asked the earth to witness for him. And the earth replied with 100,000 voices, the voices of furrows and graves, voices of youth and age, of man and woman and child, the unheeded cries of beasts, the quick, unknown silvery language of fish, the sweet twinings of plants and the warm gray tumblings of stone. For all were one voice, now thundering. He is worthy. There is not one spot on this globe where he has not offered himself totally, selflessly, through countless, endless lifetimes to the attainment of enlightenment and to the welfare of all living beings. Mara's hosts dropped their weapons and fled. His daughters prostrated and asked forgiveness. His great war elephant, mountain girded, crashed to the ground like a heap of stones. The flowers faded and the incense and perfume drifted away, then all was gone. Alone beneath the tree, the future Buddha only pressed on, deeper and deeper, without stopping anywhere, transcending all limitations, swallowing up the darkness with his own light until with the dawn, his true mind rose clear and radiant and obvious as the daybreak. And when he glanced at the morning star, he found enlightenment itself crying out, wonder of wonders, intrinsically all living beings are Buddhas, endowed with wisdom and virtue. He was 35 years of age, and he had broken through to what others had yet only half dreamed. The path had been reopened. The Dharma was once again accessible to the efforts of humans and devas. In the steadily rising morning light, a supreme Buddha now sat beneath the suddenly blooming tree. So the story of the Buddha's enlightenment during our enlightenment sitting inspired us to continue on sitting all these many hours, sitting all night. Deepening our practice in whatever way that we could. So this describes the experience of enlightenment itself. And as the story implies, enlightenment is available to all of us. But what does this really mean? So I would like us to spend a little time thinking about this. So I walked away from the Enlightenment sitting, having appreciated the opportunity to get a little flavor of what maybe the Buddha went through in his search. And appreciating the interconnection and the deepness of that moment. And then I went, after we had some rice gruel, I went for a good rest. And I woke up and things seemed to be sort of back to normal. This experience is now gone. I experienced it, I appreciated it, and now it has dissipated. So when we think about this experience of enlightenment, it's described here as kind of a moment in time. And then there's a before and an after, and then there's an after, and everything changes. But I'm wondering if this is really the case, and especially for those of us who are not at this very advanced stage of practice, if it feels like a before and after. So if we think first to the before, there's a backstory. The story implied that it took many years of practice, many efforts before the Buddha was ready for this particular moment. And so if you go to the backstory, you can see that it's a long quest. And for those who are unfamiliar, a little less familiar with the life of the Buddha, he grew up in a very privileged household. He was the son of a prince / warrior, born to royalty, had everything given to him. And then at age 29, through various reasons, I mean, he was protected his whole life. And then at age 29, he had some experiences that put him in touch with the more troubling side of human experience. So he encountered an old man, a sick man, a dead man. And he began to ask this question, what is this suffering? And am I, even growing up in this privileged way, subject to suffering? He decided that he was. So he goes on this quest to discover the answer to this deep question. What is this suffering, and is there a way out of it? And so he left the palace, left behind his wife and his newborn child, and his father and mother, the king and queen, and went on this quest, first studying with various teachers who offered him various types of meditation practices, things such as holding the breath for long periods of time and coming to sort of the sense of a state of neither perception nor non-perception, all these things. He mastered all these techniques, decided it did not give him the answer to that question, what is suffering? And so he decided to become an ascetic and go off on his own and did various ascetic practices, one of them being near starvation. Decided that eventually that wasn't going to get it either. He didn't have the answer to this deep question, what is suffering? What's the way out of it? And so that's where this story then picks up, the story that we just read. of sitting down in meditation beneath the Bodhi tree and going through this deep sort of awakening experience. So one might think, if you look at that before and after, suffering before, after, maybe a state of bliss that one attains. And this, I think, is a myth of our modern culture. Enlightenment is bliss. Enlightenment is nirvana. And once you have attained the end state, that's where you remain. More likely, it is the experience of seeing reality more clearly. More likely for those of us in everyday life. It's an ongoing kind of process. So this past week, as I thought about what I might say in this particular service, and also as I was preparing for the Enlightenment sitting, I go to the ubiquitous internet, which is both a blessing and a curse in this day and age. But there were a couple of very interesting videos and movies that I encountered. So the first one was, let me get the name of this person right. There was a YouTube video, Ricardo Palomari's, a TED Talk. And he was addressing the question, why I stopped pursuing enlightenment. And this is an individual, clearly a seeker, who over many years, he set out with this question of, how do I attain enlightenment? And he too was kind of thinking of it as an end state. And so he did these various things. So he went to Mexico and he took peyote and he had this very beautiful mystical experience, which lasted for a while and then went away. And so then the next thing he did was go on these extended sort of physical challenges, one of them being a walk from, I think, it's European countries. So I want to say it's like from Spain to some other European country that took him several weeks. And then he went on a long bike ride from Alaska all the way to South America. So I'm not exactly sure how you ride your bike over the ocean. He probably had something that helped him on that journey. But anyone, that took 21 months. And he said he felt very nourished, very, sort of challenged and changed by that experience. But it still did not get at his question, what is enlightenment? Am I enlightened now? Have I achieved it? Kind of thing. Then the last thing he did was go on a meditation retreat, a Vipassana retreat, 10 days, maybe a month, I don't remember exactly, in which Vipassana as a type of meditation practice very much is focused on this sort of continuous body scan, checking in and seeing what's going on with your body. And while that was helpful, again, he felt like he had not achieved or attained enlightenment. And so he finally came to the conclusion that he is going to stop pursuing enlightenment, that all of these experiences that he had, while they were deep and meaningful, they were temporary. They went away. It's like after our experience of the Enlightenment sitting, ours was maybe short, but it goes away. And it's not maybe this deep, profound before and after kind of experience. So he decided he would stop pursuing those mystical answers. He would stop pursuing that goal of attaining enlightenment. In our own Song of Meditation, Samasunam writes, seeking or attaining enlightenment is the defeat of meditation practice. If such thoughts occur, wake up from ignorance, frightened as if swallowing poison. So enlightenment, the way I am looking at this is, it's not a fixed experience. That is something that is indeed much more of a process that goes on maybe all the time. And it's about the journey, not about the end point. So if we look in our everyday lives, today, this moment, what does awakening mean? What does the enlightening process mean? Well, perhaps it's being together like this. Hopefully in a bit, we'll have time for us to share our thoughts and ideas about enlightenment, which must be probably unique for each and every one of us. So the second movie that I encountered was called Mandala. It's a Korean movie about two monks. Has anybody seen this movie? So it's very interesting, and it's all about the journey. So these two monks were very dedicated to the practice. And throughout the movie, you can see how they're approaching the journey totally differently. So one of them was a fallen monk, so to speak. I found it interesting that he was still able to travel around and go visit various monasteries, and they accepted him into their retreats and practices because he did something that normally gets a monk kicked out. So he engaged in a sexual relationship with a woman to the extent that it was a little unclear, but perhaps rape was involved. And all members of the monastery where he resided had to be tested to see if their particular semen were matching in this rape. And the other thing that he did was engage in drunkenness. So he's always drunk throughout this entire story. So this particular approach to walking the path toward awakening has to do with going into the defilements, just embracing them and going into them deeply. And there are other Buddhist traditions where we see this. Chanting Rinpoche, I think, is an example of this. And one could see in the movie that the spiritual quest was pretty deep and profound, and you could see him changing throughout the movie. So the other monk, and the two of these encountered each other by chance. They met on a bus. They were going in this period between retreats, they were journeying around Korea, and they met on the bus and they started traveling together. So we have the fallen monk, and then you have the monk that was like the epitome of conforming to traditional practice, ascetic practice, following all the rules. Occasionally engaging in ascetic things, like there's this practice of burning fingers. Has anybody heard this? Some monks do this sometimes as a sign of their devotion. So they wrap their finger in this incendiary cloth and light it on fire and burn it down so it's about half gone. So he had done this from time to time, and so he had basically stubs for fingers. So this is like the other extreme of pursuing awakening practice. And he too throughout the movie deepened his practice. The two of them began to see, it's interesting, they began to merge into more a single path, starting from these very different places. And coming to an understanding that they were both on this pretty deep quest. So I thought those stories were fascinating. And now if I bring this back to, what is it that we're doing here? Why is it that I live at the temple? I'm one of the lucky ones. I have opportunity every day as part of the temple structure to engage in meditation practice, formal meditation practice. And to interact with all of you, to gain wisdom from all of you. And as I sort of plod down this road, little by little, I see myself, my character transforming a bit. So that maybe I'm a little softer, a little more open, a little more able to engage with fellow practitioners on the journey so that we can help each other. So that maybe, that's my sort of personal interpretation of this awakening experience. I'll throw out a couple more thoughts, and then I'm interested in hearing your take on this. So Dale Wright has written a book. This is a Buddhist scholar, modern day Buddhist scholar. He's written this book called What is Enlightenment? And when he looks at the meaning of enlightenment for everyday practitioners, he looks at it as the most important part of this is engaging in deep inquiry, some sort of deep inquiry. So if we start with the question or the quest of the goal is enlightenment, at least for me, it was like this. I gave up because that's too far away, too lofty. It feels like, again, if I'm trying to attain something, I'm not going to get there. And so my take on this is just do the practice. Just do it. Just sit, just chant, just read Buddhist scriptures, just engage, and let that enlightenment stuff take care of itself. So that's one thing that Dale Wright points out is, okay, that's one approach. Another approach is this deep inquiry approach. For us in our tradition, we've talked about this before. We work with a Wadu practice, which is a type of koan practice, a type of deep inquiry, unanswerable questions. And but he also suggested that simply engaging with the inquiry is part of the awakening experience. The questions that you might ask yourself: what kind of life should I be living? How can I be awake in each moment? What kind of community should we aspire to create? What would it mean for all of us to wake up? If all beings are Buddha, I'm a Buddha. So how should I be in this world? And so his encouragement is that we engage in these deep questions as we go throughout our life. And he points out that the questions keep changing, for sure, and that's part of the process. And that enlightenment is very personal. One size does not fit all. It's very different for each of us. And then eventually the inquiry extends to the present moment. So as a Buddha, I'm connected to all suffering. So how did I cause the current state of affairs that we are in our temple, in our community, in our world, just bringing it back to me taking responsibility, seeing my role in that. Okay. So that is my tome, my rant on this topic of enlightenment. And I'd like to open the floor for any of you who have comments or thoughts about any of what I said, anything that occurred to you as we were exploring this topic of enlightenment. And so I asked for my good friend Jagwa to take around the microphone. And also, Simone, if you can read the chat, see if any comments come. So just raise your hand and Jagwa will bring you the microphone.
Thinking about this, I guess I think of enlightenment as similar to any other goal or something that I would wish to achieve in attempting to differentiate between attempt and attachment to outcome, or not intent and attachment to outcome. So I can have an intention that that's something that I'm working towards, without necessarily trying to like grab it or attain it or hold on to that desire. And that's difficult to do with any goal or desire, certainly one like enlightenment. But I guess that I don't, right now in my thinking about it, I don't think of it as different than any other sort of thing that I would like to achieve. It's just really big.
Thank you.
Good talk, Marlon. It's a good take on enlightenment. I feel like I sort of like inside as I was listening, I sort of kind of hit some of the points as you covered, sort of like, I don't know, sort of like in considering the Buddha's, enlightenment and the things that he went through to get that, and commitment and things like that. My mind sort of went like, oh, like, I've been focusing a lot on doing, just kind of getting caught up in life and all the plans and things like that. And like, I've been sort of neglecting some, spiritual cultivation that I could be doing. And so my mind was instantly like, oh, now you have to like give all that up and do, like you must attend more retreats and this and that. And then, that's not necessarily the only way either. It's sort of bringing our own practice into our own situation and what fits with our current situation in life. And so I think that idea of just cultivating questioning and cultivating like exploring and being involved in the Dharma and the Sangha to kind of cue us into that inner cultivation is what keeps me going. And maybe a sense of questioning, and just focusing on that idea of enlightenment and sort of like, what is it now in this situation? How does it manifest? And maybe like that curiosity and maybe a little bit of discomfort too, like just pushing boundaries a little bit, internal boundaries.
Hello. I think you've covered a lot. There's a lot to be said about what
table, I've heard the phrase, chop wood and carry water before enlightenment, and after enlightenment, you chop wood and carry water. I don't see that enlightenment is an end result, but after you get enlightened, you don't pass away or pass on. I don't believe. But let's see that. I think going through these aesthetic practices that the Buddha did, even though he didn't get the answer through them, I think it was part of the path. If he hadn't gone through that, he wouldn't have eventually gone to the Bodhi tree, right? So it was part of his enlightenment in my eyes, even though those weren't the direct things that gave it to him. He still had to go through them to get to the end result. And as far as his enlightenment, when you were talking about this story, I kept thinking about things I'd read in the Hindu practice, and how through this purification process in his meditation, as far as going through the desire, and it's basically I was looking at it one layer of the illusion was lifted and another was lifted. And then finally, when he touched the ground, he merged with all things, which in Hindu would be like merging with Shiva, merging with the original frequency, realizing that everything is connected and that you're a part of everything. So I kind of likened it to that in a way, so the earth spoke, the beast, everything. Well, that was like a realization that he's connected to everything. They all gave the approval, right? That he's worthy. So I think that enlightenment is a realization. Also, through the Hindu things, there are enlightened beings in Indian Hindu that they become enlightened, and then afterwards they keep living on, but they become teachers and whatnot, or not. But I think it's a realization that it's a state of understanding that our collective constructed reality is an illusion, and being very aware of that throughout your life. So you're living in a state of very clearly understanding what the illusion is and what isn't, while being understanding that you're connected to all things as well. So there's a lot there. Thank you.
Good morning. I think of it more as a process than a place. I'm working towards how do I respond to each and every situation in an appropriate manner. I think maybe I was thinking when I taught school, I used to always tell the kids, the Bible, we went from this language to this language to this language, and somewhere along the way, things had to get a little changed around. And I think the same thing's true for our sacred texts. It went from Sanskrit to this, to that. So maybe our meaning of enlightenment was not his meaning of enlightenment, the Buddhist. Because even after he achieved enlightenment, then he did continue to suffer. People still, in his life, still died. He still got sick. So to me, the enlightenment part is, how do you respond to these incidents of suffering in your life?
Thank you. I'm reading a comment here from Saran Kalaska. She writes, I'm on the same page as my fellow Dharma guardians, trying to temper the fight between practice and the rest of life, to figure out how most wisely to work with whatever life and my mind throws at me.
I was thinking about a few years ago, we had a dinner for, I think, like an interfaith group. So it was people from different faith traditions that were visiting each other's communities. Thompson, I think you were there. And so it was wonderful because these sort of elemental questions were raised because everyone's just trying to understand, well, what is this tradition about? And I think we had a conversation about the concept of enlightenment in Buddhism. And I remember Haju quoting this saying, I don't know if she coined this or was quoting someone else, but she said, there are no enlightened people, only enlightened actions. And I was really struck by that because it felt very practical to me. Like I don't have to wait for some change state, which I may have no conception of, but that in each moment I have the opportunity to behave as if I'm a wise and compassionate person. So it's sort of maybe it's the fake it till you make it kind of a mode. But that has actually been very helpful for me, just to see it as the action can be enlightened, even if I myself have make many mistakes.
So I'm grateful for the wisdom that all of you have shared. And as we continue this journey together that we do, waking up in each and every moment. So let's now say the 4 great vows together, and then we'll close after that with some announcements. All beings, one body.
All beings, one body.
I vow to liberate.
I vow to liberate.
Blind passions, one root.
Blind passions, one root.
I vow to terminate.
I vow to terminate.
Dharma gates, one mind.
Dharma gates, one mind.
I vow to penetrate.
I vow to penetrate.
The great way of Buddha.
The great way of Buddha.
I vow to realize.
I vow to realize.
It's just because the cord is.
Good morning, beautiful enlightening beings. It's beautiful to see your faces this morning. We have activities, not as many as sometimes, but we do have activities, and we would be delighted to have you join us for them. Specifically, the introduction to meditation classes are beginning very soon. We offer 2 versions of this class. One is a series of 6 Thursday evenings. This is online.
5 Thursdays.
Actually, 4.
4. 4 Thursday evenings, available online 6:30 to 8:30. This begins on the 13th of this month, so it's coming right up. We also offer the same material in the form of an overnight class. It's a kind of a retreat. It gives you a sense of temple life, as well as the introduction to meditation class. That is a Friday night and Saturday morning. Sleep is included. It's not like the Enlightenment setting where we don't sleep. That is the 21st to the 22nd of this month.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
COVID permitting.
COVID permitting. That's 7 p.m. on a Friday night to noon on Saturday. We also offer yoga classes. Some of us here are regulars at this class. That is on Tuesday evenings, beginning again in February, in the beginning of February. Also 6:30 to 8-ish, 8:15-ish. It is a beautiful class, and I'm a regular. I can tell you it's a beautiful class. It's a wonderful thing. Just show up. We are also beginning workshops, particularly a workshop on preparation for death. Sounds like a Debbie Downer sort of thing, but it's not, because it's going to happen to all of us. And it's around us all the time, every moment. It's always around us, not just during the pandemic. And it's kind of good to get ready. That begins in February. So that begins on the 6th and then rolls forward for 7 meetings after the Sunday service. We are also coming up on another observation of New Year in my own personal life. I believe it's important to observe as many New Year celebrations as possible. The Lunar New Year is coming up, and we observe that with a festive meeting of the Advisory Council. That will be on the 31st. And I believe that the wider Sangha is invited to that festive meeting. And then for that week of the 31st until the 5th of February, we perform chanting for world peace here every day. And we invite your participation in that as well. After the service, Refuge Recovery is meeting, and I believe they are meeting in the basement.
The former library.
The former library. So that is through that door and down the stairs. That will be starting at noon after the service. That's every Sunday. Let me see. Is there anything else written down here? We have a sign-up sheet out on there are sign-up sheets for all these activities in the foyer. There is also a sign-up sheet to be included in our email bulletin, which is a lovely, a beautifully written and inspiring newsletter that comes out every week. There is also, if when you came in you were not reminded to please sign the contact tracing sheet, please do. It's right on sort of the low table on your right as you head out toward the door. We only use that in case there is a case of COVID and we need to let everybody know that they were exposed. Have I forgotten anything?
There are flyers. The yellow flyers have the schedule.
And the schedule for our spring, summer, wishful thinking, winter, spring activities are brightly colored out there on the table in the foyer that tells you what's coming up as the weather warms up. And the temple is supported by your kind and generous donations of money and time. There is a fishbowl just as you leave on your left-hand side for your generous donations of whatever's in your pocket. And for time, we love volunteering, and that's a beautiful way to really feel like you're a part of the Sangha. If when you're out in the foyer, you'll notice that there's a big column that's painted this deep, beautiful, deep ochre, except for an area that's white that has signatures on it. When we purchased this building, we renovated it with our own hands. And those of us who worked on that project signed that column. Well, then maybe we need to get you a Sharpie.
Okay.
And that's what volunteering does. It makes you feel like this is your home, which it is. So I'm recommending it not just because we need help, which we always do, but because this is yours.
Thank you. So we'll do 3 formal vows together and then greet each other in the foyer. Figure out how to do this. Okay. I got a strange email that says, is there somebody by the name of Bolton who is a chaplain